In the quiet aftermath of a love that twisted into chains, Maya sits alone, piecing together the fragments of a life she once called her own. Years of subtle barbs and unspoken demands have left her doubting every whisper of her intuition, wondering if freedom is just another illusion. But as she faces the mirror of her past, a faint spark ignites, the resolve to unravel the lies and reclaim the woman she was meant to be. The camera lingers on Maya's face in the dim light of her apartment. The camera lingers on Maya's face in the dim light of her apartment. Late afternoon sun, filtering through half-drawn blinds. She's seated on the edge of a worn couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles pale. The interviewer, off-screen, a gentle presence, prompts softly, "Tell me about that first moment, when it felt unsafe." Maya's eyes drift to the floor, voice barely above a whisper at first, laced with confusion. "It was ordinary, you know. We were in the kitchen, arguing about nothing. Dishes, maybe. But his words, they twisted, like ropes tightening around my chest." She pauses, breath catching, fingers tracing an invisible line on her knee. The air feels thick, her internal storm brewing. Why couldn't she see it sooner? Was it her fault for staying so long? For ignoring the gnawing in her gut? A flicker in her gaze. She glances toward the hallway mirror, cracked from a forgotten slam months ago. Shards reflect her fragmented expression, pieces of herself staring back, distorted and incomplete. It hits her then, the symbol of it all, her self-image splintered by years of doubt. "I remember looking at myself that night," she continues, voice trembling. "After he stormed out, in that broken mirror, I didn't recognize me. The fear was there, real, like a shadow I couldn't shake. It wasn't just anger, it was danger, the kind that seeps in, makes you question if you're even safe in your own skin." Confusion swirls in her words, halting, eyes darting as memories flood. Nights of walking on eggshells, the slow erosion of her voice. But something shifts. Her shoulders square slightly, breath deepening. I sat there, staring at those cracks, and thought, this isn't love. Love doesn't fracture you like this. The pain lingers, a sharp ache in her chest, but beneath it, a spark, the right to safety, undeniable now. She nods to herself, voice gaining resolve. That's when I started planning, quietly, calling Jonah the next day, telling him I had to go. For real this time. From the corner, Jonah's voice fades in softly, supportive, like an echo. "You deserve that space, Maya." It pulls her further from the ex's lingering shadow, a tether loosening. Yet as she speaks, the question hangs unspoken in the room's hush. Can she walk away without shattering completely? A few days later, in the quiet aftermath of that realization, the late afternoon light filtered through the half-drawn blinds of Maya's cramped living room, casting long shadows across the cluttered coffee table. She sat on the edge of the worn couch, knees drawn up, her fingers twisting the frayed hem of her sweater. Jonah perched on the armchair opposite, his posture open, hands resting loosely in his lap. No pressure, just presence. The air hummed with the faint buzz of city traffic outside, but inside, it was thick with her unspoken weight. "I keep hearing them," Maya whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "My family, old friends. You threw it all away. What will people think? Like I'm the one who broke everything." Her eyes darted to the floor, doubt etching lines around her mouth. She hugged her arms tighter, as if to hold back the flood. Freedom felt like a trapdoor under her feet, promising escape. But what if she fell alone? Jonah leaned forward slightly, his voice steady as a heartbeat. Those voices aren't yours, Maya. They're echoes. What do you want for yourself? Not what they think you should endure. She exhaled sharply, a shaky breath that rattled her chest. The red string around her wrist caught the light, a simple twist of yarn she'd tied that morning, a makeshift reminder. This is mine to cut when I'm ready. It itched against her skin, a tangible pull against the invisible chains. I want out, for good, but logistics scare me. The lease, my stuff, finding a place that doesn't feel like hiding. She paused, hesitation flickering. Do I even deserve that? A fresh start without the guilt? Deserve? Jonah echoed gently, his eyes meeting hers without flinching. You don't earn safety, Maya. You claim it. Let's map it out. Resources first. There's that women's shelter network. They handle transitions like this. I can help call tomorrow. One step. She nodded slowly, the doubt in her chest loosening, like a knot unraveling. Inhale. I'm not to blame, she murmured, testing the words. Exhale. I'm not to blame. The string seemed warmer now, less a tether to fear, more a thread she could follow. Jonah's quiet nod anchored her, his stability a bridge to something real. Trust without strings attached. As the sun dipped lower, painting the room in soft gold, Maya straightened a fraction. The voices still whispered, but her resolve hardened, a quiet fire kindling. Could she silence them for good and step forward? The question lingered, unanswered, in the space between them. Seeking further grounding, Maya attended her first support group soon after, where the support group room hummed with the soft creak of folding chairs, sunlight slanting through half-drawn blinds like hesitant fingers. Maya sat in the circle's edge, her hands folded tight in her lap, a red string looped loosely around her wrist, a makeshift talisman she'd tied that morning, half joke, half prayer, against the pull of old habits. Across from her, Elena leaned forward, her voice steady, but laced with the raw edge of memory, eyes meeting each face without flinching. I remember the night it cracked open, Elena said, pausing as if tasting the words. I'd spent years twisting myself into his schedule, his moods, like I was the one who had to fix the storm every time it brewed. But that evening, he called late, demanding I drop everything for another talk that was really just him unraveling my edges. I was exhausted, staring at the phone, and something shifted. No more, I said. Not tonight. Not like this. And I hung up. Didn't explain, didn't soften it. Just no. The room held its breath. Maya's mind raced, doubt coiling like smoke. What if that's all it takes? But what if it breaks everything? Elena's story wasn't a fairy tale. It was jagged, real, the kind of fracture that leaves scars but lets light in. Elena continued, her fingers absently tracing the faint outline of a similar red string she'd once worn. Now gone, its absence a quiet victory. The hard part wasn't the saying no. It was holding it. The guilt rushed in, whispering I'd ruined us, that I was selfish. But here's what I learned. Boundaries aren't walls to hide behind. They're doors you lock from the inside. First, name it out loud. Write down what you won't tolerate, like late-night demands or guilt trips. Say it to a mirror if you have to. Then, practice small. Turn off your phone for an hour. Tell a friend when you need space. And when the pullback hurts, breathe through it. It's your body relearning safety, not punishment. Maya's pulse quickened, the doubt fraying at the edges. Elena's words landed like anchors, pulling her from the numb fog. My pain isn't just mine. It's a signal, screaming I'm worth protecting. No accusations flew, No glorifying the ache. Just practical lifelines, tossed casually yet precisely. Around the circle, nods rippled. Jonah's encouraging smile, the other's quiet solidarity. Maya felt it settle, acceptance, unjudging, like being seen without dissection. Trust bloomed, tentative but real, in this web of shared breaths. Elena sat back, her gaze lingering on Maya. It's possible, the exit, but how do you hold the line without losing pieces of yourself along the way? The question hung, unanswered, as the group exhaled into the pause. The red string on Maya's wrist suddenly feeling less like a tether and more like a choice. As the days blurred into deeper emotional work, the dim light of Maya's apartment filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting jagged shadows across the cluttered coffee table. She sat cross-legged on the worn rug, a half-empty mug of chamomile tea cooling in her hands, trying to journal the day's small wins. But the pen hovered, stuck. Then it hit, a scent, faint but unmistakable, like the cologne he'd worn when he cornered her against the kitchen wall. His voice, a low hiss. "You're nothing without me." Her breath caught, sharp and shallow. The room tilted, heart slamming against her ribs. Maya dropped the pen, clutching her chest as if to hold herself together. Flashes erupted, his hands gripping too tight, her apologies spilling out like apologies for existing. "Why do you always do this?" His voice echoed in her skull, and she was back there, shrinking, dissolving into the fear that had defined her for years. She stumbled to her feet, vision blurring, legs buckling toward the bathroom. The mirror above the sink, still cracked from that night she'd thrown her phone in rage, shards spiderwebbing from the center, stared back at her fractured reflection. Eyes wide, pupils swallowing the irises, she saw the lie etched in every jagged line. "This is your fault. You'll always break." Panic clawed up her throat, a vice squeezing her lungs. She gasped, sliding down the wall, knees to chest, the cool tile biting through her jeans. Breathe, she thought. But the air wouldn't come. Her mind screamed to run, to hide, to let the fear swallow her whole. Fingers trembling, she fumbled for her phone in her pocket, dialing Jonah before she could second-guess. "Maya," his voice cut through the static hum in her ears, steady as an anchor. "I can't." The words choked out between hyperventilations. "It's happening again." The memory, "I'm here. Listen to me." In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow. "You're safe now. Right here. With me." She pressed the phone to her ear, his calm a lifeline amid the storm. "I'm not to blame," she whispered to herself, repeating it like a mantra, her voice ragged. "I'm not." The words anchored her, pulling her back from the edge. Inhale, shaky, forced. Exhale, firmer, the tightness easing just a fraction. The door buzzed. Jonah, already there, closer than she'd realized. He let himself in with the spare key, kneeling beside her in the bathroom's harsh light. No questions, no pity. Just his hand on her shoulder, warm and unyielding, grounding her to the present. "You've got this," he murmured, his presence a quiet promise of care without demands. Maya leaned into the touch, her breaths syncing with his guidance over the phone still clutched in her other hand. The mirror's cracks seemed less accusing now, fragments of a self she could piece together, but as the panic ebbed into a heavy exhale, the question lingered in the quiet. Could she stay here, in this body that still trembled, and let the support hold her without pulling away? Building on that fragile calm, a short while later in Jonah's apartment, the room was a soft pocket of afternoon light. Jonah's apartment cluttered with books and half-empty mugs. Maya sat cross-legged on the worn rug, her knees drawn close like a shield. Jonah knelt opposite her, his voice steady, a anchor in the quiet hum of the city outside. "Let's start simple," he said, eyes meeting hers without pressure. "Breathe in through your nose, 4 counts. Hold for 4, out through your mouth, like you're sighing away the weight." Maya nodded, but her chest tightened. The air felt thick, laced with the old fear that if she let it in, the emotions would flood, drag her under again. Vulnerable, exposed, her hands fidgeted in her lap, nails digging into palms. She inhaled, shallow at first, the anxiety clawing up her throat, a knot of what-ifs. What if this cracks me open? What if I can't close it back? Her mind raced, echoes of past hurts, whispering she wasn't built for this. "Feel it," Jonah murmured, not pushing, just there. "Where does it sit in your body?" "In her ribs," she thought. A squeeze. She tried again, deeper this time, but the inhale trembled, caught on the edge of panic. He handed her a notebook, its pages blank and waiting. Beside it lay a single feather, pale gray, plucked from some forgotten walk in the park earlier that week. Jonah had found it on the sill, said it reminded him of breath, light, directionless, until guided. "Write what comes," he said. "No judgment, just the sensation." Maya's fingers brushed the feather as she took the pen. It tickled her skin, soft as a secret. She exhaled, shaky, incomplete, and pressed the tip to paper, tight, like wires around my lungs. The words stared back, raw. Her breath hitched again, anxiety peaking, a wave cresting in her chest. But Jonah mirrored her, inhaling slow. "Out with it, Maya. Firm. Let it go." She did. A solid exhale, pushing against the fear. The feather quivered on the table, lifting slightly in the puff of air. Calm flickered then, a brief hush in her body, like the first drop of rain after drought. "I feel it loosening," she whispered, pausing, the words hesitant, but hers. "Here," she tapped her sternum. "I feel I deserve this." The quiet. Jonah's nod was gentle, affirming without fanfare. "That's your body talking. Trust that voice." They wrote more, sensations unfolding, the warmth in her belly, the ease in her shoulders. Moments of calm dotted the page, like stars emerging. But as the exercise ebbed, Maya glanced at the feather, still and spent. How to keep listening, without the fear pulling her apart. The question lingered, unspoken, in the space between breaths. The group's shared strength continued to inspire, and in a subsequent session at the community center, the dim light of the community center room casts long shadows across the circle of folding chairs, where a dozen survivors sit, faces etched with quiet resolve. Maya huddles in her seat, arms crossed like a shield, her breath shallow as the facilitator nods to the woman across from her. Sarah, mid-40s, voice steady but eyes glistening. "I woke up one day and realized I wasn't just surviving. I was suffocating," Sarah says, her words slicing the air. "The first step was admitting I deserved air, real air, not the scraps." Nods ripple around the circle, a murmur of agreement. Maya feels it hit her gut, a twist of shame, rising, hot and familiar, whispering that her story doesn't belong here, that exposing it would shatter her fragile hold. She shifts, gaze dropping to the scuffed linoleum, tempted to vanish into silence, her body rigid with resistance. Next, a young man named Tariq leans forward, hands clasped. "For me, it was the mirror in our hallway. I'd catch my reflection and see someone broken, pieced together wrong. But in therapy, I started seeing the cracks as maps, not ruins. I chose to walk away because staying meant more fractures. As he speaks, Maya's mind fractures too. A quick flashback pulls her under. Her old apartment, the shattered mirror on the floor after that final argument, jagged edges reflecting her tear-streaked face in a dozen distorted versions. She blinks it away, heart pounding, the symbol lingering like a ghost in the circle's center, mirroring the group's raw edges. The confessions build, each one a thread weaving through the room. Stories of quiet exits, of reclaiming keys and routines, of breaths taken without apology. Maya's resistance cracks, shame ebbing as warmth seeps in. Their voices a gentle current, pulling her toward support. She uncrosses her arms, whispers to herself, "I deserve this." The words tentative but real, echoing the growing solidarity. Eyes meet hers now, inviting, bolstering the fragile network forming around her heart. Love, they imply, without saying, is care unforced, boundaries held like lifelines. But as the circle quiets, Maya wonders, her hands still trembling. Can she trust that inner voice when her body shakes like this? Testing her growing resolve in everyday life, Maya faced her family at a tense dinner, where the family dinner table hummed with the clink of forks against plates, steam rising from a pot of stew like unspoken tensions. Maya sat at the edge, her fork tracing circles in her untouched food. The red string on her wrist caught the dim overhead light, a thin, knotted reminder she'd tied that morning, a boundary woven from her own resolve. Her aunt leaned in, voice laced with concern. "Maya, honey, you can't just cut him out like that. What happened? He was good to you, wasn't he? Families talk these things through." Her mother's eyes softened, pleading. "We're worried. You left so suddenly. Tell us why. Maybe we can help fix it." The words landed like weights, stirring the old shame in Maya's chest, a familiar churn that made her palms sweat. She hesitated, mouth dry, the room shrinking around her. Part of her wanted to spill it all, to seek their nod of approval, to prove she wasn't the villain in her own story. But Jonah's voice echoed in her mind from their last call. "You don't owe them your pain. Safety first, yours, steady, like an anchor in fog." I can't discuss him," Maya said, her voice a whisper at first, cracking under the scrutiny. Her uncle frowned, waving a hand. "Nonsense. We're family. Bottling it up will only make it worse. Come on. What did he do that's got you so twisted?" The insistence pressed in, a tide pulling her under. Shame bloomed hot in her throat. Why couldn't they see? Why did love always demand she bear the scars? She glanced down at the string, fingers brushing its rough twist. It grounded her, a quiet pulse against her skin. "No," she said, firmer now, the word rising like a wall. "I don't have to endure this, not anymore. I need space from that topic, for me." Her mother recoiled, hurt flashing across her face. "But we love you. This is how we show it." The table fell silent, the air thick with their worry, their unspoken fear of her isolation. Maya felt the backlash like a sting, but beneath it, a spark, trust in herself, flickering brighter. Later, she'd text Elena. "Tried the boundary, they pushed back, but I held." The group's reply would come, affirming, "You're allowed that. We see you." As the evening frayed, Maya rose, heart pounding with the weight of her choice. How do you hold the line when the ones who raised you can't hear it snap? With boundaries tested and held, Maya took a pivotal step forward. As the door creaked open under Maya's hesitant push, the familiar scent of stale coffee and faded lavender hitting her like a wave. Her hands trembled as she crossed the threshold, Jonah and Elena flanking her like quiet sentinels. The apartment loomed, unchanged, yet alien now, shadows pooling in corners where echoes of old arguments once hid. Maya's breath hitched, a shiver rippling through her limbs. Memories clawed. The way the walls had closed in during silent treatments, the invisible weight pressing her smaller. Fear knotted in her chest. Could she really claim this back? Or would the ghosts pull her under again? She froze in the hallway mirror's frame, its surface cracked from that final, unspoken shatter months ago. Shards glinted accusingly, reflecting her fractured gaze. "You've got this," Jonah murmured, his voice steady, hand light on her shoulder. Elena nodded, eyes soft with shared knowing. "One step. We're here." Swallowing hard, Maya moved. She knelt by the coffee table, gathering scattered mail, bills she'd once ignored in numb compliance. Her fingers shook as she swept dust from shelves, each motion a quiet rebellion. The trembling persisted, a quake in her core, as flashes surfaced. Nights curled small, doubting her every word, but she pressed on, active, choosing. I can choose," she whispered, voice cracking like the glass before her. The inner whisper, the one that always blamed her, faded, drowned by the rhythm of her hands. Elena fetched the red string from her pocket, the one they'd tied together in group weeks back. "For your boundaries," she said simply. Maya took it, heart pounding, and looped it around the mirror's jagged edge, knotting it firm. The crimson thread caught the afternoon light filtering through the blinds, a bold slash against the break. Jonah added a small stone from his pocket, placing it at the base. "A anchor," he called it. They stood in silence, their presence weaving trust into the air. No words needed to affirm. She wasn't alone in this reclaiming. As the tremor ebbed into a grounded calm, Maya stepped back, surveying the space. The apartment felt less like a cage, more like possibility, but in the mirror's fractured reflection, a quiet wonder lingered. How would this place truly become hers? Culminating in reflection, the camera lingers on Maya's face, soft natural light filtering through the therapy office window, casting a gentle glow across her features. She's seated in a worn armchair, hands folded in her lap, the red string bracelet, a remnant of her boundary ritual, still loosely tied around her wrist. The interviewer, off camera, leans forward, voice probing, but kind. "So, Maya, reflecting on that moment you left, did the fear of judgment ever pull you back? What about the whispers from family, or even echoes of him making you doubt if you were overreacting?" A flicker crosses Maya's eyes. Doubt, that old shadow creeping in. Her breath catches, chest tightening as the internal tug-of-war reignites. The pull to revisit the pain, to justify every scar. She shifts, glancing at the window, where sunlight dances on the sill, warming the room like an unspoken promise. No, she thinks, not today. Her fingers tighten briefly on the string, then release. I won't go there," she says, voice starting soft, laced with hesitation. Not because it's easy to avoid, but because staying stuck in those echoes keeps me small. The decision to leave wasn't about blame or shame. It was about choosing breath, choosing space. She pauses, eyes meeting the lens directly now. The doubt ebbing as resolve builds. Support groups where we build each other up, not tear down. Steps like enrolling in that art class, reclaiming colors I forgot I loved. It's freedom, real, unearned, because I deserve it. She unties the red string, letting it slip to the floor, her voice calm, assured. The audience, unseen but felt, leans in, trust blooming in the honesty. Love, she realizes in that glowing moment, is this: caring for the self, unbound from old hurts. But how do you whisper it to the doubts that linger? How do you truly say, I am worthy and free? The question echoes softly, unanswered, as the light holds her steady. In the ongoing journey, the camera pans across a sunlit community center, morning light spilling through tall windows like a hesitant promise. Maya sits on the edge of a worn couch, her red string bracelet catching the glow, a quiet anchor against her wrist. She's watching now, not the center of the storm anymore, but part of its calm eye. The group has gathered loosely, Jonah passing around a stack of pamphlets on local therapy spots, Elena jotting notes in a shared journal, a few others, faces Maya recognizes from confessions, clustering around a coffee table littered with mugs and half-eaten pastries. Confidence hums in the air first, warm and steady. I finally blocked that number last night, one woman says, her voice low but firm, passing a phone to Elena for a thumbs up. Laughter ripples, not mocking, but relieved, like exhaling after holding breath too long. Jonah nods, squeezing Maya's shoulder. See? One step. We got this. Maya smiles, the knot in her chest loosening. Her old fear of solitude feels distant, replaced by this web of voices, each thread pulling her forward. They share resources, a hotline scribbled on napkins, apps for tracking moods, promises to text check-ins. Call me if the quiet gets loud, Elena says to a newcomer, her eyes steady. The bonds tighten visibly. Hugs that linger, glances that say, we're in this. But as the light shifts, casting long shadows across the floor, a subtle undercurrent stirs. Internal, like a whisper in the ribs. The newcomer hesitates, admitting a fresh trigger, a family dinner invite that dredges up old doubts. What if I slip back, alone again? The room quiets, not with panic, but a shared intake of breath. Maya feels it too, that flicker of anxiety creeping in, testing the edges of her newfound ground. They lean in closer, voices overlapping with gentle plans, weekly walks, group chats for midnight doubts. Yet the fear lingers, unspoken, how to keep tending these fragile cares without veering off course. The montage fades on them, dispersing into the day. Jonah waving from the door, Elena tying a red string on the new one's wrist. Sunlight fades behind clouds outside, leaving the room in soft diffusion. Maya lingers, tracing the window's warmth on her palm, the question hanging, how do you hold on to this care, for self and others, when the path twists ahead?